each of these different vulnerabilities leads to different adaptation strategies, and that's what we're trying to interpret and relay to our local partners. Here's an example of an output of coastal bluff erosion in Pleasure Point in Santa Cruz County over time between 2030, 2060, and 2100. And we've, for this section, identified and calculated the number of private homes that would be impacted over time, with the caveat that this does not take into account current coastal armoring and protection structures, which most of this coastline right here has structures in place currently. The next step in our analysis is to interpret how long those coastal structures' lifespan is remaining, and how they could function into the future, and once they've met the end of their life, start to interpret what different land use policies moving forward from there would have on our coastal development. Here's another example of Capitola and the threats of sea level rise from monthly tidal inundation. And you can see that from the graph that most of the threat from sea level rise occurs at the 2100 event stage. However, if you look at storm-induced flooding, you can see that much of the lower portions of Capitola are vulnerable to storm-induced flooding currently and into the very near future, with many homes and businesses being vulnerable to those impacts. The two different types of coastal vulnerability lead to different adaptation and management strategies that we're trying to interpret now. Here's an example of our thought process as we take the vulnerability data and move into the next phase of our project, which is identifying adaptation responses to those vulnerabilities. As we can identify coastal storm flooding, bluff or dune erosion, tidal flooding, wave impacts, there are a number, and these are just a few examples of response options that could be taken in each of those cases. Our intent is to evaluate each of those alternate responses and then take into account the longevity of those adaptation strategies, the costs associated with those to the local municipality or the state, and then the secondary consequences as far as impacts to coastal access, beaches, natural habitat, as well as commerce. Then we're also looking at the legal hurdles of adopting the various adaptation strategies, so that we're providing the local partners with an understanding that there are multiple opportunities, and none of those adaptation opportunities comes without secondary costs or limitations. Some of the initial observations that we've made from the initial review of this impact analysis is that standard and consistent strategies to coastal adaptation are necessary to best establish resilient communities, and that on the counterpoint to that, case-by-case adaptation can lead to a porous coastal management. For instance, if your neighbor takes a different management approach to you, neither of those adaptation strategies may be as successful as having a segment of the coast all adopting a similar adaptation strategy, similar to what you found with dikes in Humboldt Bay. And then we have found that the LCP segment planning is, and the LCP as a planning tool is a really important tool for having a conversation with both municipalities and the public on what the anticipated responses can be for these various sections of the coast that are facing very different future impacts. And in addition, I'd like to reiterate that, as others have, that local partnerships are critical to making this happen. The local municipalities do not have the staff time or the capacity to do this type of interpretation and analysis and regional planning on their own, and that's why we've stepped up with the benefit and support of the state and our state agency partners to to move the process this far. But as we move forward and look at rolling easements and other tools for adaptation planning, we are going to need to rely on other local and regional partners to step up and play a key role in us being successful in taking those adaptation strategies. And if I have 2 more minutes, I'd like to take us from the planning to an implementation project. And this was referred to earlier, is a project that we've just proposed and will be going to the Coastal Conservancy next week to identify natural adaptation planning opportunities, and then work with our local partners at state parks to identify a key portion of the coastline to implement a pilot project for climate adaptation. Here's the background for why we selected the Salinas State Beach. Here's this is the Moss Landing, Salinas Valley. The Salinas Valley has significant agricultural resources. Those resources are at or near sea level, and as we roll the sea level rise, flooding models forward, you can see much of these lands become vulnerable to inundation. We have several protections in place. Both the Potrero tide gates and the Salinas River levees protect flooding into the valley from our adjacent river mouths. And then we have the natural sand dunes of Salinas State Beach as the coastal protection from storm-induced flooding. But as you can see in portions of this area, that dune complex is quite thin and is vulnerable to coastal erosion because of non-native species, including ice plant. And we've identified these areas for the restoration and adaptive management of the dunes in partnership with the state parks to ensure that these dunes are provide as much protection to the farming and other natural resources inland of these areas moving forward. Here's an example of the catastrophic loss of our 4 dunes due to ice plant, and our vision is to increase the adaptive capacity and resiliency of our 4 dunes to coastal storms by reestablishing some of the natural 4 dune habitat and protect the inland resources, both the agricultural and natural. Again, through a partnership with many of the local groups that we're working with. And I'd like to thank all the agencies that have presented today, because many of them have brought resources and support to our local groups in the multi-phase planning and implementation process that I've discussed here. Thank you.
That's good. Thank you. And back to the dune structures.
Yes.
The importance. All right, Nature Conservancy, Mr. Bloomberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Louis Bloomberg. I'm Director of the California Climate Change Program for the Nature Conservancy, and we have been working at the intersection of policy and science grounded with on-the-ground experience in place on the issue of climate resilience and adaptation for almost a decade here in California. I want to thank you for holding the hearing. It's an important hearing. I think 3 years ago you would not have happened here. So things are moving forward. We've heard it much today. Climate change is affecting the coast today, and as Ms. Bedsworth said, scientists predict that it's going to get worse over time. We need to act now to prepare for these threats. We need policies, plannings, and funding, as we've heard, and we also need action. We really need to get beyond the planning stage to take action to increase the coast's resilience. But the typical strategy won't work. Over decades, in response to erosion and storm events, Californians have built seawalls, revetments, and other coastal armoring structures along significant portions of the coast. More than 10% of the coast right now is armored. And coastal armoring has serious negative effects, and these include, for example, accelerating the erosion of beaches, degrading coastal habitats, limiting access to the beach and recreation, and really irreversibly altering the bluffs, and other impacts as well. So armoring the coast is not a viable strategy now nor for the long term, and I think it's important that we just put that out. We need to work with nature and not against it. And by using nature-based solutions, what we've heard a lot about today, what we call natural infrastructure. So in the few minutes I have, I just wanted to briefly explain what natural infrastructure is. I'm sorry, the mayor had to leave. And what we've been promoting around that. Talk about an example, one of the examples where we're working, in this case in Ventura County. Comment briefly on the state's action, and then I have 5 policy recommendations for the committee to consider for new policy to enhance California's resilience. So, natural infrastructure. It's the preservation or restoration of natural systems or features to increase resilience to climate change and or manage other environmental problems. So in the coastal context, natural infrastructure means using open space between the ocean and development to absorb floodwaters and wave energy. Wetlands, oyster beds, kelp forests, dunes, beaches, all are natural features that can help protect the coast and function as natural infrastructure. And they also will provide multiple benefits to the public. So we evaluated 9 case studies of natural infrastructure in California in a recent report. We submitted it for the committee, and many of those have been talked about today already, and it's in your materials, and I have a hard copy here to leave with you today. And what we found, briefly, is that natural infrastructure is proven. It provides multiple benefits. It's cost-effective. It's flexible, and it's popular. So one of the great examples of this here is our project with partners in Ventura called Coastal Resilience Ventura. So believing that good information begets good decisions, the Nature Conservancy convened a stakeholder advisory group with local planners, leaders, and activists to launch the Coastal Resilience Ventura project. This is something we learned from our experience in Long Island. We didn't involve the stakeholders up front, so we pulled them in at the beginning. And so we designed a decision support tool that evaluates not only the impacts, but also the natural, social, and economic resources that were important to the local community. And this tool has been very useful to help planners and decision makers have the information to compare alternative scenarios to sea level rise and coastal hazards. So the program is producing results already, and I won't go into a lot of the details here, but basically it's informing climate-smart local land use planning decisions by the City of Oxnard and the County of Ventura as they undertake their local coastal plan updates. The approach is also being used in Monterey, as we've heard, as well as in Santa Barbara counties and other places. And we've been using the tool for some time now with the Coastal Conservancy and other community folks along Ormond Beach and the Oxnard Plain to restore wetlands and protect farmland and open space there. Recently, the city of Oxnard was confronted with a proposal from Southern California Edison to rebuild one of 2 power plants that are located on the beach along the coastline there. And by using the tool, they did the modeling that showed that the plants already are threatened by sea level rise and that they would become only more at risk in the year beyond 2020 from sea level rise and storm surge. So after using this data and the tool, the City Council unanimously passed a 2-year moratorium on coastal power plant development within the city of Oxnard. And this will give them time to develop their local coastal plan to integrate climate change into that. So this is a great example of a local government making a local land use decision based on the climate risk analysis. And it's one of the first that we've seen that really come to fruition. So We've built on this collaboration now. We have a collaboration going on with Point Mugu Naval Air Station there, where they can do some managed retreat, some natural infrastructure there with the wetlands, and also working with Caltrans along the beginning to work there along the coast as well. And these two entities will spend billions of dollars to protect their resources from climate impacts, and we think this is really, the partnership is really exciting because it gives an opportunity for them to consider nature-based solutions in their work. Briefly here, so the state, I would say, was slow to get started at this, but they're headed in the right direction. We've heard a lot today about a lot of good work that's underway. And I want, the Safeguarding California plan is good. It's only advisory. There's no mandate there for the agencies to do this. There's a lot of tools and guidance and that have been presented to local government. That's all good. It still doesn't mandate and drive action. Until today, I was not aware that action on AB 691 Maritucci had even begun, and so that's really good to hear. There's been not much action on Assemblymember Gordon's Bill 2516, as in part because the coastal subgroup of the Climate Action Team meets behind closed doors. And so as a result, we find what the Stanford Law Center concluded, that coastal armoring remains a standard response to coastal hazards for some state-owned lands and property. So I have 5 recommendations for you and the committee to consider in policy where I think you could add a lot of value. The first is to direct state agencies to prepare California now for climate impacts. Consideration of climate change should become standard business practice for all state agencies, and legislation is needed to ensure that they do that and that they spend the public's money wisely. We recommend that agencies consider climate-related risks and vulnerabilities a part of all their policies in their capital outlay projects, other major public investments, and permitting. Second, we urge you to prioritize the use of natural infrastructure. Now, Deputy Director Bedsworth talked about Governor Brown's executive order, and that is strong and clear, and it states natural infrastructure solutions should be prioritized. So we believe there's a role for you to direct agencies to, where possible, they should pursue non-armoring responses to sea level rise, such as relocating public assets out of harm's way, as we've heard a lot about today. Third, we've heard this a lot today. I can't say it more. Overstate it. It's important to assist local governments in their preparations for climate change. So there's a lot of good work happening in local agencies, but it's a case-by-case approach. Just as we don't want to look at projects case by case, we don't want the cities and the counties to have to do it all case by case. So there's a role for the state in providing some standardized information, some vulnerability assessments and tools and so forth there. I would point out also that currently in the budget there is a proposal to use funds, it's in the conference committee, funds to fund the Coastal Resilient Fund that was created last year. These funds would be from the Tidelands Oil Revenue Fund. We believe this should be supported and that you should look for future funding from this source and return it back to the coast where it originally has come from and where it used to be used. Fourth recommendation is to enhance transparency and accountability by exercising oversight on the administration. You did a great job today. I commend you for that. We need more of that. A lot of information just came out today. There's very little public participation. So we recommend that the Coastal Climate Action Team at some point hold some public meetings to share their information. And we urge you to hold the administration, hold their feet to the fire on this executive order. And finally, I just want to reiterate, it's important to support aggressive emission reduction policy like AB 1488, SB 32. All of our adaptation actions will be for naught if we don't tackle the source of the problem effectively quickly. So in closing and summary, coastal armoring is not a viable solution, not now or in the future. Hybrid responses that use natural infrastructure wherever feasible are essential. The legislature has an important role to guide climate response along the coast and around the state at all scales, and we look forward to working with you, Mr. Chair, and the committee to help protect California's coast for the future. The time for action is now. Thank you.
Thank you. I like getting clear recommendations. It's very helpful.
I have written copies of my testimony.
That would be great.
I'd be happy to share with you.
Yeah, share them over. And I'll note, too, there's a tremendous wealth of information that was collected, that staff collected, and it's up on the the website for the committee or will be, so that there's hopefully a real trove of information. All right, our Sea Grants and NOAA Fellow.
Good afternoon. My name is Nick Sajapur, and although I did not wear a bow tie, I wore my best mustache. I'm a California Sea Grant Fellow with the Ocean Protection Council, and myself, along with the two fellows who will present after me, have the privilege to speak on behalf of the Sea Grant Fellows and NOAA Fellows you see on the screen and who are in the room, as well as the ones that are in other agencies across California. And today we have one simple message to give to you, and that is of hope for the future of the ocean and coast of California. I'm a pretty stereotypical Californian. I'm a surfer, scuba diver, ocean swimmer like yourself. And, you know, as we sit nearly 100 miles away from the ocean, that's all we're talking about. It's all we're thinking about. It's what I have pictures of around my office. It's what you, Chairstone, have pictures of around your office. And it's what we talk about at work. It's what we're passionate about. And we're all here to have a very positive impact on the future to preserve the beautiful and arguably the greatest natural resource of California. And what you saw on the first panel is pretty unique. There is not one entity in charge for the management of the ocean and coast in California. And this forces collaboration. And sometimes collaboration can be challenging, but it also provides a really great opportunity. And from what I've seen in my fellowship is that collaboration among all the state and coastal agencies is a partnership. And whether they all do have different legislative mandates and different priorities, but when they come together and focus around an issue like sea level rise, it is a unified front and unified effort. And through our fellowships, we're all scattered amongst different agencies, but we interact on projects together, on different grants that overlap in different coastal communities and cities. There is this growing knowledge and interagency relationship that's building within the agencies. And I urge you to, enable us and support us, our agencies and fellows to the future, by continued funding and enhanced funding for the grant programs that have been successful and for staff to administer and facilitate those grants. Secretary Laird touched upon it. Resiliency is key for California's future. And Dr. Lester gave you examples of that pretty specifically. For me, I see the resilient California as, the preservation of Big Sur and Monterey Bay, where I went to grad school, Venice, and Southern California beach culture, where I grew up, and having those key picturesque visions of California sustained in the future. And I'm very excited to see that future with you, and I'll leave it to my colleagues to give their point of views. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Good afternoon. My name is Kelsey Duckla, and I'm a NOAA Coastal Management Fellow at the California Coastal Commission. Unlike Nick, I did not grow up or even attend school here in California. A native East Coaster, I am more used to the beaches of North Carolina and the Outer Banks than I am to California's coastal bluffs. So my crash course in all things coastal California related really started when I moved here for this position. I am nearing the end of my 2-year fellowship, but being here for a full 2 years has really given me an opportunity to fully immerse myself in the ongoing efforts of the Coastal Commission as it works to address sea level rise, as well as to witness just the vast amount of work that has occurred throughout the state over the past 2 years. At the Commission, I have worked alongside a whole team of fellows and former fellows and Commission staff to develop and revise the sea level rise guidance from the Commission, and the information and recommendations within this document are especially important, as also over the past 2 years that I've been here, numerous local governments, as you've heard, have begun efforts to analyze potential impacts and to develop and implement policies to adapt to sea level rise. I have had the opportunity to work with some of these local governments as they update local coastal programs. And one of the things that I've now learned firsthand is, just as you've heard, planning for sea level rise is a really complex task. Just about every single person I talk with, as well as the vast majority of the more than 800 comments that we received on our draft guidance, and again today you've heard, this is a sentiment that this is just a really difficult topic, and we've touched on a lot of those uncertainties and complexities today. And at the same time, also as demonstrated here, I've seen people stepping up to the challenge. Individuals at all levels of government, across agencies, across jurisdictions, within NGOs and academia, and even in the business community. People are teaming up, opening new lines of communication, and really building off of each other's efforts to get a lot done. So there's an immense amount of work that still needs to be done, but it has been an exciting time and a really amazing place to start my career in coastal management and to be able to take part in efforts that will really continue to make California a leader in this field. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Brenna Mahoney-Rudd, and I am also a California Sea Grant State Fellow, and I'm placed at the State Coastal Conservancy. I'm a marine ecologist, which means I primarily work underwater, and in the past 12 years, I've actually worked all around the world, from polar to tropical climates. But 7 years ago, I made the decision to go to what I think is one of the most beautiful and complicated marine ecosystems in the world, which is the California kelp forest ecosystem. And 7 years ago, I started my PhD at UC Santa Cruz, and I earned that in last summer. And in fact, in my dissertation, I cited Dr. Clark over here a few times. So talk about collaboration. So now, with my PhD in hand, I'm really looking to use my academic and research background to enhance and promote and be a part of coastal California management. And as the Climate Ready Fellow with the Coastal Conservancy, I get to do just that. In fact, I am been managing our Climate Ready grant round, which you've been hearing about today. And in a few weeks, I'll be taking that to the board myself, which I'm very excited. Additionally, I work alongside the agencies that are represented here, and they talked a lot about collaboration, and that's what we do. We really identify how each agency is really working towards coastal resiliency and where we can play a role together. So I just want to thank you for supporting that effort. We are all very excited to ensure a resilient coastal California. I just want to thank you, Chair, as well as the Select Committee members for working with us to make that a certain future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm glad you gave us your name. Everybody sent in pictures, and I didn't recognize you without the second stage of your regulator in your mouth, so that's good. All right, thank you. We can all talk about this for hours, and in fact, we have. This went a little longer than I had thought it might as we planned it, but I think there's a lot of information on the table. This is hopefully the beginning. Well, we've had some beginnings of conversations, but getting all of these perspectives, and especially for me, linking state issues with and what the state's doing with the local level, because, as it's been said, really being able to adapt is a local issue, and that's where we need to make sure that we are putting resources and facilitating the projects and the real progress in our ability to adapt and make a resilient California. So I want to thank all of our panels and our speakers today. This is a public hearing. I'd like to ask any member of the public would like to address us on this topic. You are welcome at this point. I guess we've worn everybody out.
Go Warriors.
So far, okay, that's great. There's as I said, a lot of wealth of information on the website. Hopefully, you have contact information for the folks who are here. We certainly, in my office, have everybody's contact information. We will be reaching out and continuing the conversation. I am very interested in ways that we can drive. This is hard. Doing adaptation is difficult, and in difficult areas, it's easy to step back and just say, "Well, we'll wait." Or we're just not going to take the difficult steps now. But if we don't do that, we will be running out of time. We may be running out of time. And we have to build a better California. And we can be a model, too, for the Outer Banks and for other parts of the world if we're willing to take the steps necessary from a policy level to ensure a resilient and stronger California. So again, I'd like to thank all of the panel members. This is a good conversation, and we will certainly continue it. And we are adjourned.